Story 1. It's a fun thought experiment, but the practical effect is that corrupt and independently wealthy members of the United States Congress will chuckle and continue with their lives, while the kind of honest politicians you actually want in the United States Congress would be forced to resign. The kind of person who actually uses their salary to buy food and shelter is the kind of person we probably want in the United States Congress, versus those who don't really need it regardless of what it is. We would be better off cracking down hard on corruption and giving our members of the United States Congress much better salaries. Apparently, they do this in Singapore and it works really well. Story 2. Paying legislators poorly is a recipe for corruption. There is no answer in a democracy for people making unwise choices. Choice is the point. Story 3. The problem with measures like this is that they reinforce the tendency for politicians to come from wealthy backgrounds. If a person is already independently wealthy, they will not care about their congressional wages. It will only harm newer representatives who do not have a large amount of existing cash. For example, Maxwell Frost had trouble finding an apartment in Washington, D.C., due to a lack of income as an incoming freshman congressman. Story 4. Only people wealthy enough to live off their savings would run for office, so they would not understand what it is like to live on those salaries. Story 5. It would not matter because their wages are not the problem. It is all the insider trading, speaking engagements, and other manipulative palm greasing they get away with that funds their wealth. That is why they want to be lifers. Story 6. Not a single member of Congress took that job for the salary. Consider how many have become multimillionaires on a salary of $174,000 a year. Story 7. This is extremely naive. We should actually do the opposite. We should cut off insider trading and increase their pay 3 to 5 times. Then we might actually be able to attract some quality candidates. Story 8. As a voter, you should vote for people who actually represent you. The power is in your vote, yet somehow the winners are always wealthy older individuals. Story 9. That is absurd. Members of Congress should be paid more. It is no secret that most of them cannot afford to live in Washington, D.C. They cannot afford to return to their districts, and the reason so many are wealthy is because they start out wealthy. You know the best way to become a rich member of Congress. Start as a very rich member of Congress. Story 10. The problem is not the salaries of the elected officials. It is the vast amounts of cash they can obtain through other means by holding office. Story 11. Their salaries are not the issue. The real issue is that they can trade in the stock market. It is a massive conflict of interest that they can trade in markets over which they have direct influence. That is how you get members of Congress who make $150,000 a year and are multimillionaires. Story 12. Paying people in public office low wages is a recipe for attracting the already wealthy and the corrupt while discouraging the underrepresented from running for office. Story 13. The salary of members of the United States Congress, as well as the Vice President and the President, needs to be doubled, not reduced. Story 14. Members of Congress are expected to maintain a residence in Washington, D.C., and one in their home districts. They cannot possibly do that on the median income. They can barely manage with their current income. Lowering their salary would make it more likely that only wealthy individuals would run for office. Story 15. It will not matter unless we eliminate insider trading and undisclosed political contributions. Members of Congress do not become wealthy from their salaries. Story 16. Congratulations on turning the whole nation into a Texas public school district. Wealthy districts will produce wealthy representatives, and poorer representatives will end up selling their votes to make ends meet. Story 17. As far as I know, about half of the members of Congress are already millionaires, so it would not have that effect. Reforming the system so different people get in might be a better goal. Story 18. Tie it to median income, but at 10 times the median income. They should be purchased based on American well-being rather than special interests. Story 19. I like the idea. A couple of challenges come to mind, though. 1. If you have the time and resources to run for office, you are probably already pretty well off. 2. Even at the current congressional salary, it would take at least a decade to make $1 million. Yet Congress is loaded with millionaires. This suggests that it is not the salary from which they are building wealth. require representatives to put all of their assets in a blind trust and prevent them from acquiring new assets while in office. Yes, it should be that tall of an order to hold public office. Then live off the median wage. That might have an effect. Story 20. Good idea in theory but dangerous in practice. The United States Congress needs to attract talent, not just the rich or independently wealthy. Still, they are out of touch, so tying bonuses to local metrics could help. The median United States income in 2024 is $56,000. Most representatives make $174,000. Story 21. Only the wealthy can afford 2 homes and live in Washington, D.C. Public officials should be paid much more so ordinary citizens can run for office. This is just reality. Story 22. I am worth 9 figures. The idea that you do not pay Congress excites me because I will make much more in insider trading. Story 23. People with power who have a hard time making ends meet, in my opinion, are at risk of corruption. Paying someone well does not mean they will not do unethical things, but it does remove financial need as a reason. Story 24. That's one of those ideas that seems like a good idea at first glance, but when you get right down to it, it basically means that only those who are independently wealthy will run for Congress. Is that the intent here? I don't think it is. Story 25. I think that is a genuinely unwise idea and would guarantee that nobody without independent wealth could run for Congress. Story 26. Their constituents do not need to travel to or keep a home in Washington, D.C. Reducing salaries would simply make them more tempted to accept bribes. Story 27. Ironically, it may need to be the opposite. Not many people in Congress deserve a pay raise, but currently there is a disproportionate number of sociopaths drawn to Congress for the power and corrupt money-making methods. Giving normal people a legitimate paycheck to do the work we all need may incentivize the right people to do the right job for the right pay. Not without its issues, but food for thought. Story 28. It would not work. Even if they are required to live within the average means of their constituents, they have extra expenses of maintaining an office and a home or apartment in Washington, District of Columbia, where the cost of living is exorbitant. So, as most other users have said, it will actually only allow wealthy people to run for office, while poorer people would simply not be able to be elected. I know this is probably extremely controversial, but the best thing we could do is raise the pay for those in the United States Congress, thus making it lucrative and attainable for all people. Story 29. The problem is that they would be trying to fill our country with unnecessary projects to increase their district's budget. This would create more corruption, not less, and result in more debt. These projects serve to benefit their associates financially. This practice already exists, but it would accelerate. Story 30. Obviously, this would come with drawbacks. You will not get the best person for the job if they are barely getting paid enough to survive, or in some areas not enough to survive. Story 31. What if our president donated his entire salary and did not take any income? Never mind the fact that he is a billionaire. Not taking a large salary must make him understand what it is like to live as an average person, right? Now try the same approach with the entirety of Congress. As others have pointed out, only the exceedingly wealthy would run for Congress, or it would further encourage corruption as a way for them to pay their bills and save for retirement. Story 32. It seems like it would not change the power of lobbying and might encourage more people to seek out lobbyists. Story 33. This will only cause them to seek compensation from external sources for their influence within the political system. Story 34. I would argue that they should be paid more to compensate for not being allowed to own stocks. They should be accountable to the people they represent, not the market. Story 35. The salary is generally higher because a member of Congress has to maintain 2 residences, one in Washington, D.C., and one in their home district. I do not remember if they receive a stipend for flights and staffing, but any excess expenses come out of that salary. This idea generally will not work. Because most members of Congress are well off on their own, so lowering their salaries is unlikely to have much effect, especially when their personal net worth is in the millions. This is even more true for senators, who are generally much wealthier than their counterparts in the House of Representatives. If stock trading while holding office were banned and if members had to disclose their campaign funding sources transparently, that would be more effective. Imagine learning that your representative received funds from an oil company and then voted for legislation that impacts that company's profits. Story 36. Why should legislators from Los Angeles, San Francisco, or New York City receive more compensation for doing less than those from Wisconsin, Alabama, New Mexico, and other states? Story 37. It is a great idea, but when put into practice, I believe there would be many vacant seats in Congress because no one would run for office. Alternatively, the corruption would greatly increase. Story 38. I think there needs to be some education on mean versus median versus mode, and then a group of people should settle on a formula that provides a realistic representation of most areas. Personally, I think the calculations should exclude the top 10% of income earners in the area to remove the influence of big business owners. If unemployed but seeking work people exceed 5% of the population, they should be counted twice each. Additionally, I think representatives should be capped at 40% of the average. If they do not like this, they could advocate for minimum wage increases to raise the lower numbers and find incentives to attract higher-paying businesses to their area to increase wages in the calculations. Story 39. I think they should make more, but it comes with the caveat that they and their spouse put their investments into a blind trust, along with a yearly audit for all family members to ensure any questionable trades are logged. I think that all senators and members of Congress should be given a home maintained by the United States government. As seats change, so should the housing. Story 40. Over half of members of Congress are already millionaires, and a large portion of those who are not are close to becoming millionaires. They do not care about the $174,000 salary unless they are already relatively poor. Insider trading is where the real money is made, and that is why you see so many congressional representatives and senators fighting hard to preserve their primary source of income. Story 41. They are going to start taking bribes frequently, and corruption will increase significantly. We should have a law that converts our tax dollars into government credits and not the other way around. That way, they can only spend it on the country and the people. Story 42. This is impractical. This would lead to fewer quality congressional candidates, including a much lower quality of candidates. You would see very uneducated people trying to become a House or Senate member. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a perfect example. She technically represents her constituents coming from an average background and was working as a bartender. The caveat is that she has an international relations and economics degree on top of that. Take away the education and think, why would anyone vote for that? Representing your constituents should generally mean you can see things from a larger perspective. That is something gained through both real-world experience and education. A lower-income blue-collar worker does not really understand anything outside of their immediate vicinity. They could tell you factory workers are underpaid, but they would not understand how to put that together and expand it to other areas. This is why they deserve the wage they have now. Also, when you think about it, the $170,000+ pay they receive is guaranteed for either 2 or 6 years, depending on if you are in the House or Senate. You would drop back down to whatever work you could find afterward, assuming you are not re-elected. Story 43. I fully support this idea, but we also need to recognize that they would need taxpayer-funded housing while in Washington, D.C., since usually they cover those costs themselves. For example, build basic one-bedroom, one-bathroom apartments and assign them to senators and representatives from across the country to live together. This could be 4 150-room buildings with a community dining area. If they do not like it, they can spend their own money on private housing if they can afford it. Such a policy would certainly incentivize better care for the common person compared to the interests of the wealthy and lobbying groups. Story 44. All we need to do is eliminate stock trading for members of the United States Congress. Not a single wealthy person looking to scam the process to become more wealthy will ever run for higher office again. No other perk comes remotely close to this one in monetary value to the wealthy and deceitful politician. Story 45. Your law says, you must have generational wealth or be corrupt to be in Congress. It does not say anything else. Overall, it makes things worse, not better. Story 46. That will make already wealthy people the ones likely to run for office. That is the last thing we need. Story 47. They should receive minimum wage and the same Veterans Affairs benefits as a veteran. Then both of these issues will be resolved. Story 48. It is probably better to keep it close to other members, but tie it to performance, where the measure is improvements in the district's average income or some other economic value creation. Story 49. It would not affect what they receive from lobbyists and corporate sponsors. They do not become multimillionaires from their salary. Story 50. The original plan was that people in the United States Congress would be wealthy in their own right when they serve and not depend on any salary from the government. Therefore, only the rich would serve in Congress. Story 51. Then poor neighborhoods would be even more marginalized. Their representatives would literally be paid less. Maybe pay should only increase with the percentage of the standard of living or be set by the percent decrease in the national poverty rate. Story 52. I think a salary like this should be imposed more on the Senate than on the House of Representatives. Since the 1990s, the vast majority of senators have been the first to become corrupted by increasing their personal wealth through networking with industrial leaders and lobbyists. Story 53, cool idea, but we would need to offer them subsidized housing since most of them need to pay for 2 separate residences, home and in Washington, District of Columbia. Story 54. I think it's funny you believe they care at all about their salary. It is all about the book deals, speaking fees, campaign financing, and eventually getting a seat on some board. I say go the other way. Increase the salary and provide a pension, set them up for life. The cost is that all other ways to make money are forever cut off to them. Any other money they make going forward must be given away to a charity not owned by them or a member of their family. Story 55. Such would open them up to easy bribery. The first few presidents were not paid and had to maintain the White House on their own. If you think that is impressive because they understand the plight of the ordinary person does not command people to kill and die. The ordinary person does not need to travel the nation to look at tragedies to feel heard. The ordinary person need not help craft society itself. There is plenty of corruption without having basically homeless people in charge. Story 56. Feel-good nonsense like term limits. Simple knee-jerk rules like these are not going to fix anything. And actually fixing things is boring, thankless work. Story 57. Honestly, I think it would completely change how policy is made. When your paycheck actually depends on the financial reality of the people you represent, you become much more motivated to care about housing, wages, and healthcare. It is easy to ignore a sinking ship when you are watching from a yacht. Story 58. I think every angry constituent should have the right to throw a single root beat at their congressperson from 100 feet away if they walk 10,000 steps every day for a month. It would get us in shape, shame our congressperson, and be a boon to beat farmers. Story 59. Lawmakers almost all have to have 2 residences in order to be in Congress because they must still live in their district or state. Honestly, we should probably pay them more. Low pay would just be another justification for seeking other sources of income. Story 60. As appealing as it may sound, paying your representatives extremely low salaries ensures 2 things. 1. Only individuals who are already wealthy enough to not require the salary run for office. 2. Corruption becomes even more widespread because those who are not wealthy have a strong incentive to supplement their income. Story 61. Imagine you are a girl. You have a close girlfriend who had a wedding ceremony on the bride's side. Then, at the groom's side wedding, she invites a mutual friend who is less close to her than you when you are all sitting together at the bachelorette party. But you receive an invitation to the groom's side wedding in a text message like this. We are planning to go to the seaside for the groom's side wedding. We are all going together, but there are no free seats anywhere. If you want, you can come. How would you perceive this? Or maybe she just wrote it for the sake of saying something and actually doesn't want you to come. Story 62. Imagine you are a girl. You have a close girlfriend who had a wedding ceremony on the bride's side. Then, at the groom's side wedding, she invites a mutual friend who is less close to her than you when you are all sitting together at the bachelorette party. But you receive an invitation to the groom's side wedding in a text message like this. We are planning to go to the seaside for the groom's side wedding. We are all going together, but there are no free seats anywhere. If you want, you can come. How would you perceive this? Or maybe she just wrote it for the sake of saying something and actually doesn't want you to come. Story 63. What do you think of using a fire retardant paint and painting the trees in the forest to help fight the wildfire that is currently raging? 1. There are more immediate problems. 2. The solution causes more problems than it solves. 3. The solution reveals a fundamental ignorance of what caused the situation in the first place. Story 64. Sounds quite unreasonable. We should pay legislators more so we can have better people from backgrounds more representative of their districts able to be in Congress. Story 65. Members of Congress should be public servants. Set a fixed salary for them, and they should not be allowed to earn any other income while in office. Story 66. Last time this was asked, you have to be wealthy to run for office anyway, so their actual income does not matter and it would not affect how they feel about the median income of their constituents. Story 67. Hell, make them live under the same laws and Social Security, no pensions, no Medicare, no insider trading, and move the capital to rural Kansas with no HVAC. Story 68. It's necessary but also requires several other changes to restore representatives to their proper roles. First, no more living in Washington, D.C. Representatives can travel there occasionally, but it is no longer essential for House members to reside there. Technology has eliminated that need. Second, remove the population limit for representation. The cap was originally established due to space constraints in Washington, D.C. Third, since representatives work for the states they represent, let the states pay them a median wage and provide the same state-sponsored insurance benefits. When representatives live with, among, and like their constituents, they will remain more connected and be less likely to be influenced by special interest groups. Additionally, there will be more representatives, and they will be unable to hide when living just down the block from their constituents. Story 69. A terrific idea, but you would have to limit what politicians receive from all the bloated, corrupt corporations they are associated with as well. That is where the majority of their stolen wealth comes from. Oh, that is right, from insider stock trading too. Story 70. An easy way to manipulate this is to add a few millionaires to the pool. That would shift the median. It is still a better process than what we have now. Story 71. No. They should make a lot more and campaigns should be publicly funded. A great deal of our problem stems from the fact that the idle rich have a monopoly on politics in this country. Story 72. The approval rate for the United States Congress is around 30%. The re-election rate frequently exceeds 90%. We have the government we voted for. Story 73. No. Congress, the Supreme Court, and the President and Vice President should be paid set-for-life salaries with set-for-life pensions. All income and capital gains above that amount should be taxed at 100%. This would eliminate any incentive for already wealthy individuals to run for office or to enrich themselves beyond their official pay. Story 74. The biggest source of income for Congress is not the salary. It is the grift. This would not really address that issue and may actually make it more prominent. I would prefer to see high salaries combined with very strict rules stating that this salary is the only way members are allowed to earn income while in office. Story 75. The wealthy men north of Richmond consume the faith of the faithful so ravenously. Let them surrender their belongings as Christ did. It may widen the eye of the needle a bit for them. Story 76. Good start, but you have to include that they receive the health care they vote for as well, not the fancy health care from the government. Story 77. It is naive to think that members of Congress are primarily concerned about their salaries. Their income from insider trading, kickbacks, lobbyist donations, and other jobs and businesses far exceeds their official compensation. These practices contribute to increasing inequality, making poorer districts even poorer. Story 78. Term limits and strict, unforgiving enforcement of ethics and insider trading laws are necessary. 535 people who applied for their jobs spent millions of dollars to be elected to a position that just doesn't pay enough. Yet they knew what they were getting into. They complain about not making ends meet on their salaries, yet often become wealthy while in or immediately following their service as civil servants. They also have the option of resigning if they cannot manage their finances. I have known congressmen over the years who shared rent with 2 to 3 other members for Washington, D.C. apartments. Others slept in their offices. Why is that not considered now? They would argue that we should do that. Members receive meal allowances, expenses, and per diem while in Washington, D.C., which is outside their districts, and many receive stipends for committees or other assignments. In large part, members are out of touch with the American people and our day-to-day lives. They have entered a world of privilege and exclusivity with many perks that ordinary people typically never experience. Additionally, many take advantage of countless benefits that keep cash in their pockets, such as access to a members-only gym, barbershop, dining room, office budgets to pay for transportation, and even clothing for the creative among them. No, they are not fairly compensated. They are also disingenuous and feel entitled while telling us how hard they work and how deserving they are. Story 79. Why not have everyone live under the conditions of the least well-off in the country? Would that not be a clear enough perspective to ensure everyone has a chance to live the life they deserve? Story 80. The idea of basing salaries for United States Congress members on the median income in their districts is intriguing and raises several important points for discussion. Pros: increased empathy. Tying salaries to local median income could encourage Congress members to have a deeper understanding of the financial struggles and realities faced by their constituents. This might lead to more thoughtful legislation. Accountability. If lawmakers' salaries reflect the economic conditions of their districts, they may be more motivated to enact policies that benefit their constituents and improve local economic conditions. Public trust. This approach could enhance public trust in Congress by demonstrating that legislators are willing to share in the economic realities of the people they represent. Reduced income disparity. It could help bridge the perceived gap between lawmakers and the average citizen, potentially reducing the elitist image often associated with Congress. Cons: variability across districts. The median income can vary significantly from one district to another, leading to large disparities in congressional salaries. This could create inequities and make it difficult to attract qualified candidates from lower-income districts. Political feasibility. Implementing such a system would likely face significant political hurdles, as Congress members may be resistant to changes that affect their compensation. Focus on short-term. If salaries fluctuate based on local economic conditions, members may focus on short-term gains or popularity to ensure their own financial stability rather than pursuing long-term, necessary reforms. Complexity in implementation. Determining how to calculate and adjust salaries based on median income could introduce administrative challenges and require regular oversight. Story 81. Tie their household wealth increase to the median wealth change of their district. Lock it for a decade after they leave office. Story 82. All congressional representatives have equal voting power when it comes to laws, so I do not agree with them having different incomes. I believe lobbying should be illegal, and trading stocks should be prohibited for congressional representatives. They should also have term limits. Perhaps they should all earn the median income of the United States as a whole, which is currently about $40,000. Story 83. It should have been a thing decades ago, and it will never pass because elected officials will never vote to decrease their own pay. Story 84. Let's put a constraint on lobbying, especially the lobby group that represents another country over the United States, such as the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, a terrorist organization, and the same group funding politicians in the other party called J Street. We also need to limit the influence of the National Rifle Association and large pharmaceutical companies. We also need term limits, upper age limits, and campaign fund use limits. None of that will happen because the people making the laws are bought and sold. Story 85. They should not have salaries. They should be given an expense account and a yearly budget, and the expense account works against that budget. Every time they get elected, the yearly budget would be on the bill. Some items would not count against the budget, such as hygiene products, hair appointments, a yearly stipend for 2 sets of business wear, and once per term a furniture allowance. To be fair, if they do not go over budget, they will be allowed to either keep any remaining funds from that year's budget or roll it over to the next year as an emergency fund. They must provide an expense report at the end of every month to allow for an independent audit. They would also be able to keep their insurance and housing stipend. Story 86. Doesn't matter, they would just make under-the-table deals and insider trading like they already do to bypass it. Story 87. It would not matter. Despite their salaries, they receive money from lobbyists and commit insider trading frequently because nobody will prosecute them. This applies to both political parties. Story 88. I do not think it would do any good. Since day one, few, if any, of the people in Congress have cared about their constituents. That is how oligarchies work. Story 89. The politicians would never agree to do that, so I think it is pointless. They vote to give themselves automatic pay raises, and I cannot do anything about it. Story 90. Interesting concept, but that is not going to improve results. Just like companies, there should be a standard base pay plus short-term incentives plus long-term incentives. Their pay should be tied to their district's performance for the short term and overall United States performance for the long term. Story 91. Nobody is going to solve any problems on Reddit. Call your local representative and figure out if they seem like a normal person or an oligarchy shill, a sellout for the billionaires. If they are a good person, encourage them to run in 2026. If they will not, run against them or find a better candidate. We need to do better than these losers. Story 92. It would be great for the salary of members of Congress to be tied to the minimum wage of their district or of the nation. That will not happen. Story 93. I fully support this. There is absolutely no reason to keep flying them to Washington, D.C. every time there is a vote. If we managed using Zoom for nearly 2 years during the COVID-19 pandemic, then Congress can hold a giant conference call and vote that way. No per diem, no payment for flights and accommodations. If we want to reduce governmental waste, that is a good place to start. Story 94. That salary is nothing. It is still too much. They are all making themselves rich with the deals they make. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.